just do brief introductions, and then Hollie's here to talk about Otro, Lado. I'm trying to do 3 things at once. Never mind. Okay, so Penny, go ahead.
Oops, sorry. I just knocked myself out. But I mean, you hear me,
Okay.
right?
I hear you.
Yeah,
I
we can see you.
Oh, I just did something on my own screen. Anyway, so I'm Penny Adler. I'm the ed chair with the league. I also mentor a lot of students, most of them being Hispanic, through the various other programs. And so I really work closely with the families and get to know many of their issues and concerns.
Okay, Dana?
Hi, my name is Dana, and I serve as the legislative analyst for the League of Women Voters of California on California bills related to our immigrant community. So, and I'll be talking a little bit more about that later. And I'll have to say, I'm excited to hear from Hollie. Prior to COVID, I was doing court observation for El Lado. So, and I just found that so interesting. So I'm excited you're here to find out how things are going and what you guys are working on now. Thanks.
Robert?
Hi, everybody. Morning. Robert Vivar with Unified U.S. Department of Veterans Resource Center. And recently, for the last month and a half, taken on another hat as part of Chaparral Allegiance, which is a group of organizations in support of our migrants here at the Chaparral.
Okay, Jane?
Hi, I'm Jane Andrews. I'm a board member of the League. I'm nominated for program chair for next year. And one of the things I'm especially interested in doing is building more bridges with the Latino community here in the San Diego region.
Maggie?
Oh, I see. I was already unmuted here. Sorry. My name is Maggie Baker, and I started a group, South Bay People Power, about 5 years ago in Chula Vista, and been really active with the local city government, and also a member of this originating member of the San Diego Rapid Response Network, where the primary focus was on going and observing and recording the raids that occur around our county, continue to occur. They haven't been calling much recently in the South Bay, but that then evolved into the recovering people that were dumped on the streets. So I live really close. So I was the main person who they'd call. I hear there's somebody, down at the, whichever port of entry, and, and I'd be hunting around in alleyways to find them. So, and then continuing to work with some of the families where the women were pregnant and they didn't travel on to another area, and they're here and they're in a sense dumped because there's nobody but a few of us that are trying to help them access the services and even make a doctor appointment, and their emergencies like daily. So it's like really overwhelming. And I'm even doing counseling now to try to figure out how to have boundaries. So that's and I'm involved in lots of coalitions. So San Diego Immigrant Rights Consortium, and at the state level, really active with the ICE out of California and the Vision Act co-sponsors. I really love your work. Thank you so much.
Okay, Kim, hi. Can you send me the chat, please, Kim?
Yes, I will.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Kim Knox. I'm the program chair currently and nominated for president for next year. I've also done ACLU court observation for the unlawful entry cases before the pandemic. And I previously volunteered for the IRC and JFS's Friendly Match program.
Okay, Stephanie?
Hi, I'm just learning. I'm just getting some new perspectives about the border. During the pandemic, I have represented a couple of people. I'm not currently representing anybody now in the immigration system, but that's it. I'm just here to learn.
Great, thank you. Nandita, good morning.
Good morning. I'm a member of this league. Started out in July of last year. It's going to be a year now. My first participation was the candidate forum, and I also participate in public policy, and I'm an observer for public safety and livable neighborhoods.
Okay, thank you. Margie.
I'm a longtime league member, 54 years, and also done lots of stuff in league. I'm primarily right now interested in criminal justice.
Okay.
And I have belonged to a lot of organizations that are working with that. I'm a learner about the immigration, horrified by what's going on at the border. And I've lived in the same house for 2 years in San Diego.
It's still standing, right? Okay, and I'm Beryl Flom. I'm chair of the committee. We started this about 5 years ago after the, must be 6 years now, after the state convention here, where we did a tour in Tijuana and showed them issues about immigration and deportation. And as a follow-up, we have continued to educate and advocate. Just this week, we did a presentation to the convention again, virtually, and it looks like we're going to start a statewide committee on immigration at the league level. So anyway, Hollie, I want to welcome you and sure appreciate you spending some time with us today. So go ahead.
Of course. Thank you all so much for having me. And I apologize. My voice is kind of gone right now, so I might be a little difficult to understand. But yeah, it's really great to meet you all, and thank you so much for giving me the time to speak with you today. Is there any way that I could share my screen?
Sure. Kim?
Yeah, go ahead.
Let's see. Oh, perfect. Okay. I made like a quick presentation. Okay. So my name is Hollie Webb, and I'm the lead attorney at the Border Rights Project for Lado. We have offices in 3 different locations. We have an office in Tijuana, which is where I work, and then we have a San Diego office, and we have an office in LA. But we also have staff working all over the country right now. We have someone who works in Louisiana and does the sort of like cases of, from people who are detained there. We have a woman who's working currently in Pennsylvania, and she's heading our project to reunify the families that were separated under the Trump administration. Our main goal, though, is we provide legal and humanitarian aid to refugees at the border. And that's really what our work centers around in Tijuana. Right now, the Trump policies have led to a huge bottleneck of people at the border. And it's really right now the worst that it's ever been. It's incredibly dangerous for people, for the migrants, because with this bottleneck of people, the border's been closed for like the past, since Trump started the MPP program in the end of 2018 and beginning of 2019. So you have all of these people who are stuck there, and organized criminal groups, cartels, people like that are really taking advantage of the situation. So there are kidnappings, there's just all kinds of danger, and there are a lot of like fraud and scams for the migrants. We see a lot of people who are pretending to be like ICE officers or people from DHS and calling them and saying, if you pay $5,000, you can cross the border today. We see things like that all the time. And so it's a terrible situation for people right now at the border. our other projects, we have a detention project that works with the people at the Otay Mesa Detention Center. And then we also work with people who have been deported to Tijuana. And then the Family Reunification Project was what I was mentioning a few seconds ago. That is helping with the people who were separated from their children under the Trump administration. And then with our remote legal team, we have people all over the country right now who are filling in various roles and depending on the case or the lawsuit. So just to give you sort of an overview of what's been going on at the border, I'm sure that you all heard about MPP. That recently in the news, you might have seen that the Biden administration formally ended MPP, which in theory, that's great, except that that really meant nothing in reality. Basically, those people are still stuck in Mexico because the border's closed. Right now, the UNHCR has been slowly processing people who still had open MPP cases. And when I say like an open case, that means that they still had a pending court date. Lots of people in MPP, their cases were closed because they couldn't make their court dates. One of the really cruel aspects of MPP was that these people were already in dangerous border cities. They had to show up to the port of entry all across the Mexican border at 4 a.m. and with their children to try to cross for a court date. So with that, people, they had no money. They either couldn't pay for transportation, and then many people were even kidnapped on their way to their court dates. And so those people, their cases were closed by the court and they were issued a removal order. So right now, those people who are really some of the most vulnerable people, they're not eligible to cross yet. So they still haven't, it's an estimated 60,000 people or more. They're just in limbo right now, and there's really nothing that they can do. The border closure was under Title 42, and this was another policy implemented by the Trump administration. This was, I'm sure as everyone remembers, during the time that Trump was saying COVID was a fraud or a hoax, they implemented a policy from the CDC to prevent anyone from entering the border except for basically US citizens or permanent residents. Certain people with specific work visas can also enter, but it's kind of a case-by-case thing. But basically right now, because of this policy, people can no longer seek asylum at the border. And the previous, what the law allows for is that normally under normal circumstances, people who are seeking asylum can present themselves at a port of entry and go up to the CBC or CBP officers and say, I'm afraid to return to my home country. I'm terrified. I want to seek asylum. And they would be permitted in, and then they would be processed with a case. The same would also be true if people crossed in between ports of entry. They still have a legal right to seek asylum. Right now, under Title 42, people who cross in between the ports of entry, they're being returned to Mexico. And then people who ask for asylum at the port of entry, they're not allowed access. Frequently, CBP tells them to go to a different location that's not real. We see that all the time. There's so much misinformation in general, but that really is really detrimental. But under Title 42, like I said, there's just a huge backlog of people that's developed in these border cities that are already some of the most dangerous places in Mexico. Tijuana, I live in Tijuana, and it has like a tourist side, so there are safe places in Tijuana, but in places like Nuevo Laredo and Reynosa, it's a completely different world. It's not somewhere that there's a huge tourism industry, and so it's extremely dangerous. And since COVID started, we kind of moved to a remote model so that we could work with more people and have more volunteers who could work from home. So with that, we've been able to start working with people in these other border cities. And things that we've seen, like especially in Nuevo Laredo, is that under Title 42, people who crossed the border near the Matamoros and Reynosa area, CBP expelled them into Nuevo Laredo. And really, and sadly, many of these people were kidnapped as soon as they were expelled across the border. It's a really terrible situation. Currently in Tijuana, as Robert was mentioning earlier, there is a refugee camp outside where Ped West used to be. It has approximately 2,000 people, but it's really hard to estimate right now. It keeps growing. There's no sanitation or water being supplied. People have to pay for showers from people who live near the area. I mean, there are a few people who donate things like that, but a lot of people have to pay. They're completely dependent on people donating food and clothing and other items and necessities. But it's in this area too, organized criminal groups have started sort of surveying the area and monitoring people. So we see people there who are being threatened, people who witness crimes especially are threatened. We've had lots of people just who are really terrified and reached out to us for help. And it's really, really sad because there are hundreds of children there as well. And it's a really dangerous situation for them. Many of those people have been living in a tent for months now, and there's just still no end in sight. So what we're doing at the moment with as many people as we can is we're trying to request what's called humanitarian parole. And that's basically permission to enter the United States and start their asylum case. With the parole process, however, the government is only allowing, it was previously 35 groups per day across the entire border. Now it's been upped to 55 groups per day, but it's still, it's nowhere near the numbers needed to admit everyone who's trying to seek asylum at the moment. You've probably heard all of the news stories talking about how there's a crisis and how there's a surge of migrants at the border. In reality, it's not like that. I keep mentioning this, but it's the fact that we've had 3 years of this bottleneck and people have been waiting the entire time, and they've been waiting and waiting and waiting. And so it's naturally there are going to be more people at first because there have been so many people who haven't been allowed to enter. But from the cities that we work with, I would say next to Tijuana, we see the most people from Nuevo Laredo, Reynosa, and Piedras Negras. And those cities, especially, it's just there are less resources than in Tijuana, and so it's a really dire situation. This is sort of a photo of the camp at Chaparral, and this is just a small photo of everything. It's expanded greatly, and I don't know how many of you have been to this area before, but it's where like Ped West used to be, like right when you exited, and it's covered in tents right now, and it's people just, I mean, there's one of the organizations in Tijuana, Refugee Health Alliance, and some other medical organizations. They go every week and try to give care, but it's really difficult. There's no privacy for people to call lawyers or doctors. It's just a really, really terrible situation. And we keep seeing CBP telling people when people don't know or what's happening and they go to the port of entry at San Isidro to ask for asylum, CBP frequently tells people you have to go to Chaparral. And it's obviously there's no one being processed here. It's a lie. It's that Ped West has been closed since March 2020, but we see that almost daily that people are told to go here, which is really not helping the levels of people. We, as an organization, we depend on volunteer efforts, and that's right now with this parole project. Last month we were able to send 409 parole requests, and that's largely due to the efforts of our volunteers. It's been really wonderful. We've had students, we've had people who are at home, we've had people who are retired. We've had people from all backgrounds who have offered their help, and it's been really wonderful in that regard. And we definitely would not be able to send out the parole requests or really offer the help that we are without that. And if anyone is interested, this is the link to our volunteer registration and our contact, and I can email the slideshow afterwards. But I wanted to open this space after this for questions and to see what you all are interested in hearing more about.
So we're recording this, so it'll be on our website. You don't need to send it.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah. I'm curious why you live in Tijuana. I assume you're American.
I am.
So I'd like to hear that story.
Well, personally, it's a lot easier because we accompany people to the port of entry. We when in normal times outside of COVID, we would have in person like little like we could charlas and little sessions for people to offer legal orientation. We would basically all of our services would be in person, and hopefully, it'll eventually go back to that. But it was a lot easier to, I mean, just in general, as a lawyer, it's much easier to work with people when you can have an in-person interview and explain like the different aspects of the law that applies to their case, and you can meet them, you can review their documents. It's not all over a phone call, so all of that's like easier living in Tijuana. But I also, I mean, it's the rent's cheaper than San Diego. I live close to the beach. It's great.
Okay. Are there questions? Maybe stop your screen so I can see.
Yeah,
Sure.
that would be great.
Jess.
Okay. So anybody have any questions for Hollie? Jane, go ahead.
I think Dana was first.
Oh, Dana. All right.
Okay. We're probably gonna have similar questions, Jane. I have two. Thank you, Hollie. So just to summarize my understanding of who's able to get into the, as far as request asylum and such. So we have the unaccompanied minors, they're able to get in, correct? And then we have those that are trickling in that were under the MPP program that have a court date scheduled, they can get in. And then you're saying a few folks can get in under this humanitarian, what do you call it, like humanitarian parole? And so are those that's my first question regarding those, if those are the three, if I missed anything.
No, and that's it right now. That's correct.
Okay. And then what is our solution at this point? I mean, in the fact that Biden is, I mean, he's been in office now for 6 months. What can be done at this point when the system has been so, has been ignored or just, I don't know what the right word is, blown up. So what can we do? What can be done at this point? I mean, I know we need to pass that law, federal legislation, but that's not going to happen. So I'd like to get your thoughts.
Oh, I mean, there are several things. First of all, instead of putting all of the resources toward enforcement and expelling people and transporting them and paying for detention centers, we need the government to put resources toward ending Title 42 and processing those people. The backlog of people is created by the government. It's not that there's a crisis. It's not that there's suddenly thousands and thousands of people. It's a created emergency. So it's the fault of the government that there are these people, and they have a legal right to seek asylum. People don't, as you all know, I mean, people don't leave their homes just for, just because it might be interesting to move here. I see people every day who are crying to me, and they were like, this was my house. I lived here for years and years. I didn't want to leave, but people were shooting at us, or people killed my family members. People, it's, I mean, like, you're most comfortable in the place where you grew up, in the place where you're from. It's, and so it's all of that it needs to be factored in. But all of those resources need to be put towards ending Title 42 and processing those people at the border. That's sort of not the end to all of the problems that the Trump administration and past administrations, not just Trump, have created. Our system of immigration courts is incredibly unfair, as I know that some of you have observed in court. It's very biased. It's like the judges were all former prosecutors, which is also similar to the criminal justice system, but on an even more unfair level because the client has less rights in court. So I think for that, I think that we need to have I think one solution would be to have the immigration courts be like normal federal courts, where the judges were held to the standards of other federal judges, as opposed to being just hired by the Department of Justice. And even now with the Biden administration, some of the most recent immigration judges who were hired were picked by the Trump administration. And they were just fast tracked in, and there was no reason for that. It's just, we have so many biased judges with no immigration experience, and you can't have a fair chance in court with that. So I mean, that would be one, federal solution.
Yeah.
And just from a human rights perspective, I would love for a more fair immigration system to eventually happen that didn't rely on people's trauma, basically. It's like people are arguing that it's like right now our system tries to find the people who've had the worst things happen to them and uses that as a currency to get status in the US. And it's just people are just forced to, keep reliving those things over and over in court. And if we just would go to a more humanitarian model, we could do, I mean, there's so many things that could be done that are better than now. But we could do a refugee program where people were screened in the home country and then allowed to enter without having this like arduous court process. That would be, I mean, if it were run fairly, I can see lots of issues with that too. But it's just depends on people really putting having a human rights perspective first.
Great. Yeah. Thanks, Holly. Yeah, we were pleased to see that the County of San Diego is going to now offer that legal representation to those detained. I think that will help, having observed what happens in the courtroom and when they don't have an attorney. It's pretty sad. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just, I mean, there are just so many things that are, I mean, I could go on forever about all of the things that are unfair in the court system. For example, if you have a bond hearing, ICE can unilaterally overrule the judge's decision. Like literally, if in a bond hearing, if the judge decides to free someone, ICE can file for what's called an emergency stay, and that goes directly to the BIA and the person's not released. What's the point when you have the prosecutor can do that? It's completely unfair.
Thanks so much.
So Holly, realistically, what do you think we can do? What can Biden do where he doesn't have to depend on the Congress?
Well, he can end Title 42 without depending on Congress. That was implemented by the Center for Disease Control at the order of Trump. So that can completely be revoked. And
so why do you think he hasn't done it? There's a lot of pressure.
I think it's a political decision. I think that it's interesting because it's, Biden hasn't changed really any of the Trump policies except in name. But many of people like Ted Cruz are arguing that he's like allowing the border to open, which is completely unrealistic. So I think that there's an aspect of him trying to save face and look, I don't know, like tough at the border or whatever you want to call it. And so I think that's why he didn't, but it's it's to the detriment of a lot of people.
All right, Jane, what's your question?
Yeah, I have many, but the main one is I'd like to ask you more just about asylum decisions, because my understanding is like only 10 or 14% of people who apply actually get asylum. So there is the issue of sort of the criteria. And, I was wondering, as well as that it ends up probably being very subjective depending on which judge it is, but is there a way we should advocate to revise the criteria for asylum? Yes. And could you explain that a little bit?
Absolutely.
And who we would go, is that Department of Justice, or how would that occur? Does that have to be legislation?
So that one, well, there are two aspects to that. So most of the regulations, there's under the law, like, hold on, let me get a drink of water. My voice is cracking. I apologize. Under the current law, whenever there's a piece of federal legislation that leaves sort of an opening or it can be vague, federal agencies have then the opportunity to kind of fill in the blanks. And that's what we've done with immigration. Congress passed the Refugee Act in the 80s. And that basically said that you have the right to seek asylum, and it can be based on your political opinion, your persecution based on your race, your religion, or your membership in a particular social group, or your nationality. And the other ones are very clear. It's, if someone's being persecuted because they're a Muslim in one country, or the primary example is obviously during the Holocaust with Jews. that would be like a clear example of someone who would be considered a refugee and could seek asylum. Political opinion, if you were an activist in the home country or something and you were being targeted because of that. But the biggest issue we see now, though, is particular social group, and it's not defined under the law. And so that has given DOJ essentially the space to fill in the blanks for what that means. And if you look at like case law starting in the 80s and on, they've gradually shrunk all of the people who can be included in that group. And as times have changed, people aren't necessarily being persecuted as much based on their nationality in the world. You know, it's there are always atrocities that are happening, but the reasons for them and the groups doing them change. Central America is where we see the most of our refugees coming from, and primarily there, the people who are persecuting people aren't state actors. They're not. It's not always the government. It's usually gangs or other like criminal groups, cartels. And so, under the criteria right now, if it's not the government doing it, you have to prove another step. You have to prove that the government is also unwilling and unable to protect. So what happens in court with that is that even if, the government's completely corrupt and they support the gangs or whatever, the IJ will look at one news article saying that there was a gang member arrested in El Salvador. So obviously the government's trying and they're able to do something. And then they'll say, you don't qualify. It's ridiculous. It's completely ridiculous. And you'll see for domestic violence and people that have, say, like your husband was in a gang and he, got all of the gang members to go after a woman all over the country. They would still say, well, that's not a particular social group. What group are you in? People try to, we've tried to use just women, like say like Honduran women. We've probably presented that in court as a particular social group. And some courts accept that, but not all of them. So it's not the same across the country. And Trump revoked one of the main pieces of legislation, or not legislation, but one of the main cases from the DOJ and the immigration agencies that protected women in that category. So that's sort of, go ahead.
Very complicated. Is there any way to work with the, Merrick Garland or the Department of Justice to have more sort of administrative law to define this more broadly?
I think that
would it require legislation? What?
No, I mean, so much of this is defined by, basically it's like you have the DOJ and then you have EOIR, which is the Executive Office of Immigration Review. And then, and that you have the Board of Immigration Appeals. So it's like all of these like sub agencies.
Right, yeah.
And they set the law basically. And then Merrick Garland, though, can pick any immigration decision that he wants and either revoke it or override it. Which is what we saw Sessions do and Barr. And that's another thing that I think is a terrible power for anyone to have, because you're always depending on, the benevolence of which administration comes in.
Right.
And it's just somebody has unilateral power to rewrite the immigration case law. It's been politicized by every single administration. It's never to achieve fairness. It's always to achieve a political end. And it's been like that regardless of party, regardless of administration.
So right now, Harris and the Biden administration is, of course, saying, don't come to the border. I'm just curious how you would deal with that. If you would, and I always kind of wonder how these people aren't reading newspapers or watching TV. So you say, don't come, but anyway, how would you deal with that? Is there a group of folks who would say, under these circumstances, you should come and this is how you should do it? Or just kind of curious what your recommendation would be regarding that issue.
I just don't think that there's a way that you can tell people fleeing for their lives to not come. I just, I mean, they have a legal right to seek asylum under international law. And, I just think that most people in that situation, if it were, any of us and our families, and it was stay and possibly die or flee somewhere, I think it's, an easy choice. But to your point, like you're exactly right. People aren't like reading the politics of the US. I mean, people didn't know that Biden had been elected. I've met people who had no idea like what government was in place. They're not thinking about that. And so it's things like that are very frustrating. It's just a political statement. But it's useless. It's ignoring really the causes of the problem.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Maggie?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think Stephanie has her hand up.
Oh,
And I'll go
I
on.
just had, thanks. I just had a brief question. Our laws are broken. And I think everybody knows that, and they know they've needed to be fixed for years and years and years, and nothing's been done. But you mentioned that about 10 to 14%, I think, of the applicants are actually admitted. And I wonder whether you have any percentage in the past, before Trump, going back years, whether that's really a pretty standard percentage of people admitted, or whether it's gone down. Do you have any idea?
Yeah, so it's definitely lowered over the past few years of the Trump administration, but it's never been very high. I mean, it's maybe when the courts first started, it was a lot higher then, but it really depends drastically on which court and which jurisdiction you're in. Because if you're somewhere like El Paso, 92% of cases are denied there. And so, whereas if you're in San Francisco, it's a lot more fair. You have more of a, I think over half, possibly win there. But I mean, there've been more, I would say, like ICE friendly judges put in, because the Trump administration tried to target courts like that were more fair. So I think those numbers will go down as well. But it just really largely depends on where you are. And it shouldn't be like that's another issue that's extremely unfair. It shouldn't depend on where you end up in the US, how fair your case is.
Jane, did you have any other questions?
Yeah, that's sort of a follow-up. Who are the groups that are trying to make changes in the case law? Is the ACLU working on this? Are there any groups we should get behind?
I would say the ACLU is always bringing cases to try to change things. I think everybody's just stretched really thin at the moment, because there's so many crises happening in so many different directions.
Yeah.
But I know that the Center for Gender and Refugee Studies, they're going to be working on some case law or for cases to try to target some of the things like implemented by the Trump administration. It's just that usually, because Congress doesn't do anything, that usually ends up being the process, is that it has to go through the courts. And then you get wins in the 9th and the 4th Circuit, maybe the 2nd, but everywhere else, it's really, really, really difficult to change case law in circuits like the 5th, like where Texas and Louisiana and places like that are. So that's how you get this like piecemeal change.
Sorry,
So-
Maggie?
Oh, okay.
Maggie, go ahead.
So quickly, we've talked a little about the Title 42. Do you think that is the most likely thing that will change at a certain point, when they feel like there's less pressure, people to, okay, so what if that is changed and they don't put the resources? What can we do to be prepared on our sides? Because we saw what happened with the way that they were dumping. They don't care. So I'm talking about federal immigration agencies are going to be the last to take care of the people.
Yeah.
So how likely do you think that is to happen? And is anyone thinking about that possibility, what to do?
I think that's on everyone's mind at the moment. The Title 42 is tied to COVID. So, I mean, if there's any, inkling of the pandemic left, I don't think that they're going to revoke it. So with that, I mean, I do think we have time to plan. Right now, there's, I think some of you have been volunteering with JFS. They're receiving all of the people that are paroled in. So I think like things like that will just have to be scaled up. I mean, it will be difficult, but we will need federal resources, and hopefully they'll be granted. But right now, the government has basically outsourced every aspect that a government would be responsible for to small organizations. Like right now in Mexico, we literally were given 2 days to roll out COVID testing for every single bordered city. 2 days. How long did it take the U.S. government to make COVID tests available? And so, like, we've had to come up with plans, like working with the ACLU and other organizations. But it's like all these nonprofits together. We're given 2 days, and we were told that people who are entering through humanitarian parole would not be allowed to enter without a negative COVID test. And these are people, you know, who are living in camps. They aren't like in places where there's an easy medical center. And the way that it's happened, you know, people have had to find places where they could, and we've had people who have already been robbed while trying to get their test. It's just, you know, but yeah, so it would be wonderful if the government would act like it didn't fulfill the role of a government and do this, but
Well,
Have they
since-
thought about going to camps with the vaccines? I mean, we just heard, you know, there's a huge number of Johnson and Johnson sitting around that might expire. Why don't you just take a group, go to the camp and vaccinate them all, like with the Johnson and Johnson, you know?
no, I mean, that would be wonderful. But so what they're doing with the vaccines is that we basically, the US government has kind of strong-armed Mexico into enforcing their southern border and saying, we'll give you vaccines if you stop people coming in here.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
All right.
So they're not really trying to vaccinate and take away the excuse of letting people in.
Yeah, I just have a quick question, Holly, in regards to volunteering. I'm not an attorney. I don't speak Spanish. Is there any opportunities for me to help out? Is that on your website? Will I be able to find those opportunities?
Yeah, so there's an application on the website, and there's also an email address. But so for people who are in San Diego, also, we always need people who are willing to accompany people through the port of entry. That's always a need, and you don't necessarily have to speak Spanish to do that. There's always other things that we're doing remotely. Even just filling out the parole request, like that, you know, sometimes like we have other people who can interpret. There's also if anybody's ever volunteering and they need help with interpretation, there's an app for your phone. It's called Tarjimly, and I'll put the name in the chat. But it offers free interpretation.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
So are the courts are now
Oh, I
operating
don't
in San
see it.
Diego now, right? And have they increased the judges or anything?
Yeah.
They're operating, but it's mostly for cases that weren't new. Like it's a lot of the cases that were previously like on their docket. The MPP cases still are going forward.
But are they actually now starting to take the asylum cases and increase them and get the ones that have been in the pipeline for a year, 2 years, finally getting them heard and sent through?
At a really slow rate. I wouldn't say that they're
Really?
trying to increase capacity or
No. How many do they do a day, or do you even know?
that. I'm not entirely sure. I know that the amount of judges in San Diego hasn't really increased because OTI has had issues at the courthouse. So they've been doing both OTI cases and San Diego cases in the same place.
So they are
I-
doing some. Okay.
I have observed court before COVID down there, and there are about 3 or 4 judges working at a time, and they get through a case in half an hour. And then there's another court where they do the people who cross between the borders, between the ports of entry, and they're all in shackles and considered criminals, and they're out of here. And it's just
And this is
procedural.
immigration courts we're talking about,
Yeah, right.
correct?
Right.
Okay.
You could go down and observe. I called them last week, and they said it depends on the judge whether they'll let observers in. Hello. And so you can call a day ahead and find out, have them ask the judges whether you can come.
Can you give us that number? I'd be
Yeah, sure.
interested to consider it at
I'll
some
put it
point.
in the notes.
Thanks.
I have it in the other room.
I find it interesting if they have the right to deny people coming into the court and observing. They shouldn't have that right.
Even
That's
family
right.
Doing
members.
their job appropriately, anybody should
Yeah.
be able to walk in and observe. It's ridiculous. Wonder if I can test that. Huh.
Yeah. No, they'll even block family members sometimes.
Oh, jeez.
Okay, so does Otro Lado do any other work such as feeding or paying for bail or?
So we kind of try to fill in the gaps where we can. In Tijuana, especially when MPP was like before those people were starting to be processed, we started a program where through donations that we received, we were able to give people food cards and just like little prepaid cards where people could go and buy things in Tijuana. We started a class for new mothers to teach people how to nurse and, you know, basic like nutrition for the babies, things like that. But we've tried to fill in the blanks where we can.
But you stopped that with COVID.
Like we're not doing like the in-person meetings. We're still doing the food cards, but it's a little more challenging with COVID. But you know, we've tried to move as much as we can to a remote model.
And do you anticipate going back to in person?
Eventually, we, you know, like there are some benefits to the remote work in that, especially we can work with people in different cities. And so now we do have access to clients who are all across the border. So in that, and just being able to also get more volunteers that way so people don't have to necessarily travel, we'll probably definitely keep doing a lot in that way remotely. But I think we'll definitely go back to having in-person legal orientation and things like that for people in Tijuana.
Okay. Any other questions? Oh, Robert, go ahead.
It's not really a question, just a couple of things. Even though DHS and CBP are requiring COVID vaccines, we're getting reports that many migrants that are being paroled in are still being administered another COVID exam before they are released. However, if you show up to the border without your COVID exam, they're denying you. They're not allowing you through. So your attorney has to request another appointment to be able to enter. Bless you, Holly, to be able to enter, which is, you know, I mean, it's ridiculous. You know, you announce it last minute that, you know, migrants are required a COVID test. And if they don't have it, you know, you don't give them enough time. And if they don't have it, they're denied entry. But yet those that do show up with a COVID test are still administered a COVID test. And the other thing that we're seeing now is that they are also being taken on a DNA sample.
A DNA?
Yes, a DNA sample.
Every person who crosses now, they're doing a cheek swab, which also the people who are administering the COVID test right now, it's Jewish Family Services. And so just to comment on that, it's good that they've been doing that like with everyone who crossed. And so that just kind of shows how unnecessary this extra step of requiring the COVID test in Tijuana was, or anywhere on the border. But also, if CBP is able to give DNA tests, I think that they are able themselves to administer a COVID rapid test. So that would be one way to you know, not create this false, unnecessary hardship for people in Mexico.
Do they have to pay for these tests?
Oh yeah, we're trying right now. We're coordinating resources as fast as we can to get free tests. But when this first rolled out, that wasn't there yet, and we couldn't, because we had to basically. It's just complicated for like agencies or organizations in the U.S. to find like a random pharmacy in Mexico. So it's like, you know, you have to transfer the money and get it to a bank account and you know, have those meetings and get all of that set up, and that takes a while. So when it first started and people had 2 days, there was no like pass for the people who were, you know, their parole date just fell on the day that started. So they had to go and pay, which Tijuana, it was a little bit cheaper. Like they were around $14, but in other border cities, they're almost $50.
Oh, that's absurd.
Yeah.
Yeah, right now, I don't know what the allotment is, but we had received a message from Otro Lado for the migrants that we're assisting, that they had made an arrangement at a clinic not real far from the border where they could go in and have the quick test administered at no charge to them. Again, I don't know how much resources Otro Lado provided to the clinic, but in the last few days, we've sent quite a few number of people to get tested, and they've all been able to get tested and get their certificate and be able to enter. The other thing I wanted to mention is not so much of a question, but a show of gratitude to Otro Lado and Hollie and the group of people that she has been working with. Uh, I have personally met, I can't tell you how many persons, but an enormous amount of families that thanks to Hollie, they were able to get access into being paroled into Mexico. And these are families with extreme conditions, and I mean extreme. Families that have suffered, kidnappings, beatings, families with very sick, small children, pregnant women about to give birth. I mean, you can just about every vulnerable case, persons with extreme persecution, and not just in their country of origin, but also here in Mexico. And to see the look on their faces and get the messages back from them once they're across, with the sign of relief that they can try to live a normal life or be able to have their kids grow up. It's incredibly rewarding, and I just wanted to make sure that Hollie is thanked for that, because again, I talked to a lot of people. I have been able to meet a lot of these people that she has assisted, and it's incredible, commendable, the work that Al Otro Lado and Hollie and Ginger are doing.
Thanks for that, Robert.
Are you dependent on donations and grants, I assume, for your funding?
Basically, as a nonprofit, yeah, that's sort of how we get the majority of our funding or grants and donations.
Okay, Hollie, this has been fascinating. I really appreciate it.
Of course. No, thank you so much for letting me come.
And anytime you want to chime in by email or come to our meeting, which is the second Thursday of the month,
Yeah.
at 9 a.m., we'd love to have you.
Well, thank you so much. I definitely would love to come to more.
I don't think you were at our last meeting, but we had Border Patrol. And then Dulce Garcia was there and said, it's not true.
Yeah, that's what we see pretty much.
Having the perspective of someone on the ground is really helpful to us. So appreciate it.
Of course.
If you hear of ways that we can help, we'd love to do it.
Absolutely.
So you're welcome to stay. Robert said that the things are getting worse at El Chaparral, so tell us about that.
Of course, I'm right here, just a few yards from the Chaparral, and every day that I come to work in the morning, I see how the camp is growing. About 2 weeks ago, there was an estimate that there was about 2,000 migrants camped out. Now it's more, I would estimate, around 2,500. Even though there are many that are leaving on a daily basis, there are still just an incredible amount arriving on a daily basis. And as Hollie stated, the sanitary conditions, they were bad for 1,000, they were bad for 1,500. You can imagine for 2,500 how bad it is, without proper showers, enough restrooms, food, apart from the danger that the families are facing, with kidnapping attempts and beatings, people being charged to even use the public bathrooms that have been installed. It's chaotic in there. This weekend, it even got to the point that it was reported that some people came in wanting the migrants to go stage another protest at the border. At first, they did not want to go protest, but then they were approached and asked to go protest, and they would be paid to go protest.
Oh.
We got reports also from other migrants within the camp that they were threatened that if they didn't go protest, that they would be harmed. And what we hear is that there was a group that did go protest along with some of the agitators. And the last report we got was that some of the agitators ended up getting beaten up and detained. Now, we haven't got a confirmation on that. Those are just information from some of the migrants that were there in the camp.
Are there police around?
Very little bit police. Usually it's only one police car, one squad car. And you can imagine for that amount of people, the thing that's not very understandable, there's National Guard continuously, around the border area, and why they're not being instructed to patrol the camp, for the safety of the vulnerable families is beyond bizarre. Why they're not being put into action to assist.
And those are Mexican National Guards,
Mexican
right?
National Guard.
Yeah. And the US people stay on their side, right?
Yeah, the US people stay on their side. Absolutely.
Okay, what else are you working on?
Okay, the other thing, on a good note, we reached out to Congressman Tacano's office and Congressman Vargas's office regarding COVID shots for our deported veterans. And the reason we did that is because we found out that US manufacturing plants were being allowed to take their workers from their Mexican maquilas across the border in buses to get COVID shots administered and then returned back to Mexico.
Oh, my heavens.
So of course I hit the roof and I contacted Congressman Tacano's office and also Vargas's office, and Telemundo done a little bit of a clip on it. So I think that prompted them to respond. They both contacted me that afternoon to provide them a list. And I just sent an update request right now when they're going to come down and do this. So hopefully our deported veterans and first degree family members will be able to go across the border to a staging area, get their COVID shots, and be able to come back home.
Which one are they going to give them? Are they going to give them Johnson & Johnson? So it's one shot?
Johnson & Johnson,
Yeah, that would
the
be the
one-shot
best
deal.
One shot.
Yeah, that would be the best.
Yeah.
Hey, Robert, about how many people are in the community that you've got names for? About how many folk?
From this office, I've got about 28 names, but 3 of them have already received their shots because they're elderly. So there's about 25 names that we have. And I understand that Congressman Vargas's office was reaching out to the other veteran organization to see how many, they may have. Because it is about, getting everybody vaccinated. Doesn't matter, what organization you belong to or not. It's, getting everybody taken care of.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's great news. We could do that for some more Mexicans, right?
Absolutely.
Do you know what percentage of people are vaccinated now?
No, I don't.
Holly, do you?
I'm halfway there. I still have my second one to be done.
Okay.
And I understand that tomorrow they're going to be available. It's the Sinovac. So I'm going to be very vigilant. So if they are available tomorrow, then I can go get my second one.
But you have to get the same company that you used the first time.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why it's taken longer to get that second one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think the overall percentage is high yet. It's been a really slow rollout.
Okay.
It's getting better, but it's still very slow.
All right. Okay. Yeah. What's going on with VI International?
Via International, well, we've started to, or not started, but continued to vamp up our migrant kitchens, TJ. Since we're not doing the once a week at the Chaparral because of the security conditions there, we're gonna continue doing the TJ Kitchens at Casa de Luz, the LGBT shelter, who's housing about 50 people. But we're also on Sundays, since we are doing border church presence now on the Mexico side, we're gonna start doing our feeding also after border church. So what we're gonna start doing as of this Sunday is that our migrant kitchens TJ at Casa de Luz will prepare meal for the Casa de Luz population, but also for those migrants and anybody in general that attends border church. But we're also continuing with Juventudo's Meal Shelter, which we hold our nutricology class on Thursdays, and also provide a meal for the whole shelter for that day. And we're also looking to extend to another shelter, which is housing at the moment 200 migrants.
Okay. All right. Anything else for you?
Yeah, just real quick. Over the Memorial Day weekend, we had some more. We had actually 4 more mural installations. One of them was in Silmar, and that one was really neat because it was sponsored by Council Member Monica Rodriguez of the LA City Council. And that was great because we got a lot of media attention to continue to raise awareness on persuading President Biden to issue an executive order, bring our deported veterans home, and also support HR 536, the New Way Forward Act. Along with Silmar, we also had an install in Detroit, Michigan, Portland, Oregon, and also a memorial installation and service for our fallen deported veterans in exile. And that one was in Ciudad Juarez.
Okay, that's great. So how many murals you have up now? 15?
No, we've got about, good question. We've got about 20 murals that are up now.
Okay.
And we're working on another one in the Detroit, Michigan area, sponsored by the United Auto Workers out of Detroit.
Okay, anybody have updates from our committee? Oh, Jane.
Well, I wanted to just say a word about, we have a caucus, the League of California Convention on Monday. And what was very positive that came out of that was that there seemed to be quite a bit of interest in forming a more of a statewide effort. And so Dana and Beryl and I are going to follow up on that. We've got emails of people from all over the state that are particularly interested in this topic. And part of it was to bring a resolution to next year's League, National League Convention. The specifics of what the resolution would be, we'll have to determine, but we might work with other state leagues so that we really have a broader national consensus on this. So we'll keep you posted.
Okay, do you want to say anything about the county board?
Oh, yeah. Well, the Office of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs did get passed by the county 3-2, with Anderson and Desmond claiming it's a federal responsibility, not a county responsibility. And Nora Vargas gave a very eloquent introduction to it. And the Board of Supervisors did honor the rapid recovery network at their meeting, which I thought was great.
Okay, thank you. Dana, what can you tell us about the state legislation?
Right. Well, the 3 bills that the League of California League of Women Voters of California are supporting are moving through the process. Yay! AB 937 is over in the Senate. It hasn't been assigned a committee yet. So at any time this week, next week, it'll get assigned to committee in the Senate. And therefore you need to talk to your senators, either Hueso or Brian Jones or Tony Atkins.
And what's the co-sponsor? He's on, but it's good to tell him.
Hueso?
Yeah.
Yeah, good, excellent. That's good news. And the other bill, SB 56, which is the one that would provide full scope Medi-Cal benefits to people that are undocumented, the seniors. That one's moving through the process too. It's over in the Assembly. The governor has put money in his budget for that program. He actually lowered the age to 60. So Durazo has amended her bill to show 60 instead of 65. So that one's moving through the process. So that's great. That's in the Assembly. And then the other one is—
Wait, is that in committee?
let's see, I don't think that one hasn't been assigned a committee yet either. That one hasn't been assigned a committee. Now, the one that has been assigned a committee is AB 1368, which would provide case management services to those that have been granted asylum for asylees. You know, they have benefits available to them, but they need the case manager to help them get those benefits. That has been assigned a committee. It's in the Senate Human Services Committee. And Brian Jones is actually the vice chair of that committee. And, you know, he serves Ramona, El Cajon. So if any folks live in that sort of East County area, I pulled up his map. That'd be great if you could drop him a note. Yeah, he's Escondido, Ramona, El Cajon, that area. So those are the three bills. I'm excited that they're still alive and moving through the process.
Okay, thank you. Maggie, how about you?
Yes, I wanted to just talk a little bit about the TPS. They made the announcement, I think around the 21st of May, that they were opening TPS for, I think it's 4 countries that, well, I was only listening about Haiti, but also Syria and Venezuela and Burma are, I think, having some new regulations, an extension of the benefits so that new people can sign up. And so I was on a kind of a preliminary webinar last night. It's complicated. So, you know, this is the one there that countries will get temporary, specific countries will get temporary relief if they've had, you know, a disaster of some kind. And, you know, it's very arbitrary how they pick these countries, but is really, really urgent for Haiti. It's horrible there from the people that I'm in touch with. So the benefits for people are that they get protection from removal, so they can't be deported. They can get their work authorization, but it's not quick. It takes like 6 months, and they have to pay over $500. It's $545 unless they can get the fee waiver in time to get it in with their application, which is, you know, if they put in their application with a fee waiver request and it gets denied, then they have to rush and try to submit it again. And so it's a very, very hard thing to do, you know, if you don't have any money. And then, another advantage is they get the ability to request permission to travel abroad. So someone in their family is sick or dying, or for some reason they need to go and get another child. I don't know what all the things they can do, but they can do that. So those are some things that just are, you know, very valuable. What I found out last night, and Hollie will know this already, but that if some of my Haitian asylum seeking families have already embarked on their asylum process, you know, they've put their applications in, we're waiting and waiting and waiting. And we've got either pro bono attorneys or attorneys that we've paid for on their behalf. And so it's a decision whether it would be to anyone's advantage to go for this new TPS status, because if you apply for it and get it, then you are not, then that, they will then not consider your asylum application, is what I understand. Is that what you understand, Holly? And so that it's a choice. So they can't do both. That's what I understood last night. And I thought I'd bring this up because I've got Holly on the line.
So you can always seek asylum. I think the overlap would be like the change in docket, maybe. Yeah, I mean, you can always do both. It's just, yeah, I mean, for the work permit, I mean, you might get it quicker through the TPS than through asylum, because after you submit your application for asylum, right now you have to wait 6 months before even submitting the petition for a work application.
But,
So
all right,
most
but the
maybe
judge,
longer
a
than 6
judge,
months for work application.
judge ruled that TPS are here illegally. They haven't gone through the asylum process or something. I mean, that's,
Well, so they
that's
can't adjust status. That's the thing. Like they ruled it because so like some people who have DPS entered here through like a flight or something, like they might have been a worker under like one of the agricultural visas or something like that. And those people could still like eventually get a green card through a different route because they entered with inspection. But people who have TPS maybe, and they crossed the border like between ports of entry and didn't enter with inspection, the judge ruled that just being granted the status of TPS, it doesn't make that valid. It doesn't make you eligible to adjust to like a green card later.
But if they have a family member or something, there are other ways that they might possibly still do it.
Yeah, I mean, like it gets like really complicated, but there's like always like a, you can apply for a waiver, but it's you know, if people have access to like a lawyer, it's different. But
Someone's doing something on their screen. Well, I just wanted to let you know though that it is complicated. It's hopeful for some of the families that have come across more recently. And there's so many families, I don't know how everyone's going to get attorneys, because there's just no attorneys taking clients anymore. And the ones that have been pro bono, they're now charging, the ones that my go-to folks. So it's pretty slim pickings here for attorneys. So this could be an option. And just to keep in mind that if these folks are going to need $545 to apply for this 18-month, kind of ability to stay in the country and work, like that there is a need for another fund in a sense, to help folks stay in the country and not feel that constant threat of being deported. So just wanted to give a little update on that issue. It's not simple, and I look forward to having more information. They haven't, for Haiti, they haven't issued the regulations in the Federal Register, so we don't really, they can't even apply yet. So we got a little time, but all of a sudden I'm going to have like 50 phone calls.
uh-oh.
I already have.
But what did you think about that app for asylum seekers where they're going to have everything online about everybody who crosses the border? In a way, I think they have to go that route so they can keep track of people better, but in a way, it's violating their rights.
This is CBP1 with the facial recognition thing.
Yes.
Absolutely horrible. There's no reason for people to collect our data. I'm really concerned about the collection of the DNA samples. The facial recognition is so inaccurate for people of different nationalities because white folks do the design and they don't even notice. We think, oh, all Black people look alike, right? Stuff like that. It's really horrible. What's happening is it's a slippery slope. Our data are being collected. Every time we pass a street light now, like you're at risk for having your car and your, part of your person recorded. And this is, just a really important thing that in general our, red flags should all go up whenever we see stuff like that. On the other hand, the studies, as we know, show that people, once they're in an immigration system, they do show up for their court cases. They don't go AWOL. And so it's a solution without a real need.
Hollie, do you have any thoughts on this?
Well, even before you get to all of the problems with like the privacy and data collection, CBP1 isn't offered in Spanish or any other language. So for people who are in Mexico, like coming in, it's like literally you have to have someone else there translate every step of the way. It's a nightmare.
And language is like the nightmare. That's just Spanish. Okay, so
Yeah.
Creole, and a lot of my Haitian Creole speaking families, they don't write it the same way. So I can't even use Google Docs, Google Translate to write with them, or when they write me stuff, it doesn't make any sense. And these people are in crisis and they're typing me stuff and I don't understand, where are you? And
Yeah.
language is absolutely incredible. And none of my folks, not one of them, can do Zoom. None of them can do a Zoom. So you can't, they have to go somewhere where someone is going to expose themselves to COVID, you know what I mean? And help them, maybe get the app on their phone, but then they're not going to be able to do it. It is like a nightmare that it's not going to work.
Just also, I don't have any faith in any kind of app that CBP is making working long term, because right now, with just the site for people to check their court dates, it has so many glitches and so many errors. It's such a nightmare trying to help people use that. So I can't imagine any kind of app that they're trying to do working very well with a large number of people using it.
They're doing it. And I mean, how can we stop it? It's kind of concerning, I think. I have asked someone from Padilla's office to speak next month, but of course I haven't had a confirmation after a couple of weeks. So I'm going to give them a jingle today and see what's going on. But
I was thinking about who are the congressional reps from our area in California that we might put pressure on. And Bill is on the Department of Justice. He's chair of the Department of Justice Subcommittee on Immigration. So I would think his office, if we can get someone from his office, that might be somebody to talk to about the CBP1 item.
Which office did you say, Jane? Who?
Senator Padilla.
Padilla.
Jane, you've been taking all these Spanish lessons. You don't have it right. And I haven't even tried. So
Sometimes I love Jane's beautiful, she's got the movie star backdrop and everything, but it's been skipping a little bit when you speak for me. There's been slight delays. Sometimes like you don't show up visually, whatever.
yeah, you're freezing sometimes.
It's not been as smooth. It's been a little frozen sometimes, and sometimes the audio too. For me, that's just maybe on my end.
No, I agree.
Think my internet is a little shaky.
Well, she has a new computer. It's the new technology.
Internet.
Margaret, did you see Kim Knox's chat or Jim Lee translation?
Oh yeah, saw that. Yeah. Okay. The other thing is I talked to Elisa, is that her name? From Via International. Elisa Sabatini. And we talked about whether we could do a tour down in Tijuana in the future. We decided the end of September might be a good time. And she said that she thought it would be good not to have more than 20 people on a bus, and that we could do 2 buses at the same time and just to do the routes differently. And
what are you looking at touring exactly? Like what is?
Okay, so she is suggesting, wait, I gotta get her list, that we go to Maria's place, which is called Madre y Familia, and Casa de Luz, which is in Playa, over at the beach, and a Juventude, how do you pronounce it, Robert?
Moving through those, that's the shelter that
Yeah.
we've been working with.
Right. And then Friendship Park. So those 4 places. And obviously we would see El Chaparral because Maria's place is right next to that. And we would have lunch served by the migrant kitchen. And so we talked in some detail about this. She said Head West is closed, which you heard today. So it'll depend what's happened by the end of September, but we may have to cross at a different place and then meet the buses, and she would organize the whole thing for us. So that's something to keep in mind, and we'll work on the details through the summer. I'm going to be gone the month of August, so I'm going to cancel the meeting in August. And we're going to get this state group starting to meet soon. So if you're interested in participating in that, why, let me know, please. You can put it in the chat or you can email me. So that's kind of what I had to report about that. So is there anything else we want to talk about?
To ask if Holly had any suggestion, or Robert, any suggestions of if we do take the tour, what would be valuable for people to see? You know, there's a lot along the border, it seems to me.
Or what would it be valuable for us to actually do? So asking Holly, is there something?
Or to
that-
bring some things we could bring and leave. I
Bring
don't
is
know.
due, yeah. Let's think about why we're going, not for
Right.
ourselves to have a nice lunch, you know.
Right.
It's hard to say this far in advance what will be the need at the time because it
Okay.
seems to change like so
Good
quickly.
Okay.
Part of the tour cost will be donations to each of these groups.
Oh, well, that's good.
Yeah.
And I think that's always needed. So I mean, I think
Yeah.
like things like that. Robert, do you know like specifically like if the shelters accept like donations of food and clothing and things?
Oh, yes, absolutely. They sure do. And just, you know, by September, we're not really sure if the Chaparral camp will still be open.
Hopefully not.
Yeah, you know, there's talk about the border opening up June the 22nd. If that happens, I cannot see Mexican authorities allowing the camp to continue with the border crossing open. But the points that the locations that you mentioned, yeah, those would be key. There's another shelter that I've been working with, and is very possible is going to be one of our migrant kitchens also, and that's Pro Amore Day. They're holding right now about 200 migrants. Probably about half of them are children, and a good majority of the people that are housed there are migrants fleeing violence from Michoacán and Guerrero.
I'm sorry, what did you just say?
I'm sorry, they're working on the office next door and it's real noisy. That one of the other shelters that, you know, might be considered is a shelter called Pro Amore Day, which is housing 200 migrants right now. They're at full capacity. And that is going to be possibly one of our new migrant kitchens. And most of the people that they're housing there are migrants fleeing violence from Michoacán and Guerrero. There's been an increasing surge in violence in Michoacán with cartel wars going on. And there's just a ton of people that are being displaced that are arriving on a daily basis out here.
Okay, so, well, we can work on this, by August, we need to start talking about it in the league. I think we should limit it to league members and people who've been vaccinated. I think because the CDC is saying you should continue to wear masks on public transit, we should wear masks on this tour. And especially if the COVID vaccination rate is not as high as it is here. So that's kind of the talk. Oh, no, wait, you're muted now,
There we
Robert.
go. If I can mention just one more thing, I just want to remind everybody and invite you all. We have our silent march on Sunday and support and hope to pressure Border Patrol to reopen Friendship Park to allow our families to be a family on Saturday and Sundays.
Yeah,
We have a group that will be meeting on the U.S. side, led by, of course, Pastor Fanistil and the Friends of Friendship Park group. And we're also doing a mirror image of the march on the Mexican side also. So at Hollie, you can join us on the Mexican side. But,
And what time?
as many of you that can come up and support on Sunday, that'd be appreciated.
what time?
I believe John is asking people to meet at the entrance of Borderfield State Park at 12 noon.
And what time in Tijuana or Playa?
In Playas, the same thing at 12 noon. That way, on the Mexican side, I can kind of go over what we're going to be doing. And John, of course, is going to be doing the same on the U.S. side.
So is he doing the service, the communion service and all?
We're going to, right after the march, we're going to march on up to the monument area and
Yeah.
do their service. Of course, if we're not permitted to enter the enforcement area, the service will be held outside of the enforcement area on the U.S. side. And on Mexico, of course, we'll be in right at the monument where we usually do the service.
Yeah, but does he have enough audio so that you can do it together, kind of?
We probably won't. We're going to have a couple extra speakers
Mhm.
to maybe carry it all the way across.
Okay. I got my shirt on today.
I saw that. Thank you. Yes. Appreciate that.
Okay, that's good to know. I can't do it. I got 2 other meetings, but I
And
will
what-
pass the word.
What's silent? If we're going to have the talking, what is the silent march part?
The silent march is to make a point that our demands to reopen Friendship Park and the demands of the families are being silent. They're being silenced by Border Patrol and not listening to us, not hearing the families. And by the way, the road, I understand, is open. So those that, have a little bit of trouble walking or don't want to walk, you'd be able to drive in all the way to Monument Mesa.
Okay. Okay, that's good. All right, thank you all for coming. Hollie, it's been terrific having you, and come back.
Thank you,
anytime.
Holly.
Thank you all so much. This was great. It was really nice
Yeah.
to meet you all.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry for
have
my voice.
Oh, it's all right. I have the same
Yeah.
problem.
Keep up the good work. You're doing great work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much.
Okay.